Government calls for investigating the death of 20 child cancer patients in Sana'a. On World Food Day, Yemenis continue to face catastrophe over rising hunger across the country. Houthi landmines kill hundreds of civilians during the UN truce. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shazad Abdelbay. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmed bin Mubarak, discussed with the French Ambassador Jean Safa the efforts to extend the truce. Bin Mubarak said that the inflexibility of the Houthi militia in dealing with efforts to bring peace in Yemen confirms the militia's rejection to achieve peace. He called for a UN and international approach in dealing with the Houthi militia, especially after realizing its danger to security and to Yemen. In Washington, ministers of planning and international cooperation discussed with the World Bank officials ways to support the energy sector in Yemen. In the meeting, the Yemeni side praised the World Bank's support to the Yemeni people and the state's institutions, stressing the need for more support in the future. A human rights organization called for stopping the campaign of Houthis' persecutions against citizens in Bani Hashish district, east of Sana'a. Rights Radar organization expressed condemnation of the killing of 2 citizens and called on the militia's leadership to put an end to the violations committed against the civilians. The Yemeni Network for Rights accused the Houthi militia of trying to hide the crime of children who died after being injected with expired chemo drug in Sana'a. The organization confirmed that the militia had delegated representatives to visit the families of the victims, but they refused to respond to their demands. According to medical sources, the number of children who has died rose to 20 out of 48, while 30 others are still in the intensive care in critical conditions. The government has called on the World Health Organization to investigate on the deaths of 20 child cancer patients at the Kuwait hospital in Sana'a. This report has more details.
Yemen's civil war since it began 8 years ago has cut off access to essentials such as food and medicine, giving rise to smuggling networks across the largely Houthi-controlled areas, as well as the government-controlled south, which had left a negative impact on Yemeni's health, let alone the children. Yemeni internationally recognized government calls for investigation into deaths of child cancer patients in Sana'a. The government has called for the World Health Organization to investigate the death of at least 20 child patients in the controlled capital after they were given expired chemotherapy injections. The Houthi rebels' health ministry stated during this week that the children were among a group of 20 leukemia patients aged between 3 and 15 and died at the Kuwait hospital in Sana'a after being injected with old doses of smuggled medicine at a number of private clinics. A government source said that the number of deaths caused by the expired drug was 20 and called for an international investigation, urging the international community, United Nations, and international organizations, especially the World Health Programme, to open an urgent case, to prosecute and hold those involved in the accountable, and to stop the restrictions and manipulation practiced by the Houthi militia with donated drugs, and the smuggling of corrupt and expired medicines through companies owned by the Houthi leaders. The Houthis are often accused of blocking or holding up deliveries of humanitarian aid, on which 80% of Yemen population depend on for their survival. Several doctors in Sana'a told the Associated Press that the Houthi officials secretly work in partnership with medicine smugglers, who often sell expired treatment to private clinics from storage houses across the country. The Houthi rebels doesn't put Yemeni's health into consideration. Therefore, they should take full responsibility for the faulty drug that caused the tragedy.
A ship loaded with wheat belonging to the World Food Programme docked at the port of Hodeidah coming from Ukraine. The WFP indicated that the ship was carrying 14,000 metric tons of wheat flour. The ship arrived today on October 16, when the World Food Day is being celebrated around the world. October 16 is observed as the World Food Day. This year's celebration comes as the world suffers tough food crisis due to the conflict in Ukraine. This report has more details.
No one should be left behind. This is the slogan that the World Food Programme chose this year for the World Food Day. This day is observed annually on 16 of October to highlight the millions of people worldwide who suffer from malnutrition, can't afford a healthy diet, and in need for regular access to nutritious food. World Food Day 2022 is being marked in a year with multiple global challenges, including the COVID-19 pandemic, conflict, a climate that won't stop warming, rising prices, and international tensions. All of this is affecting global food security and worsening the suffering of the people, especially in a war-torn country like Yemen. The current level of hunger in Yemen is extraordinary and is causing severe hardship for millions of people. Despite ongoing humanitarian assistance, 17 million Yemenis are food insecure. The number of food insecure people is expected to go up to 19 million by December 2022. The rate of child malnutrition is one of the highest in the world, and the nutrition situation continues to deteriorate. A recent survey showed that almost one-third of families have gaps in their diets and hardly even consume food like pulses, vegetables, fruit, dairy products, or meat. Malnutrition rates among women and children in Yemen remain among the highest in the world, with 1 million pregnant or breastfeeding women and 2 million children under 5 requiring treatment for acute malnutrition. The World Food Day is led by the Food and Agriculture Organization and for the millions of people in Yemen and other countries. With the non-stop conflict, the global food security is getting worse, and therefore the people in dire situations are getting affected. This is why the need to build a sustainable world where everyone, everywhere has regular access to enough nutritious food is urgent.
A tanker carrying domestic gas exploded as it was going to Aden. Yemen Today correspondent in Aden said the tanker exploded while it was passing the main line in Habban district in Shabwa. According to the eyewitnesses, the explosion happened after the tanker crashed into a mountain when the captain was trying to prevent it from hitting a small transport vehicle that had fallen in its path. Houthi landmines continue to claim civilians' lives in Yemen. According to the UN, around 100 people have died and been killed due to mines since the truce started. This report has more details.
The United Nations Office for Humanitarian Affairs revealed that casualties increased by 38% during the truce due to Houthi landmines. According to the latest UN office reports, 169 children and 79 women were killed or injured in the 6 months following the truce. The report stated that landmines and unexploded ordnance caused 343 civilian casualties, including 95 deaths and 248 injuries between April 2 and September 30, including 101 deaths and 147 injuries in the 6 months before the ceasefire. It also noted that preliminary evidence indicated torrential rains and flooding in July and August caused the explosive materials to shift and caused damage to civilians. Meanwhile, the Civilian Impact Monitoring Project stated that the monthly rate of civilian casualties dropped 54.3% during the 6 months preceding the truce. According to the project, this year's victims were mainly in Hodeidah, Taiz, Saada, Ma'rib, and Al Jawf. Hodeidah saw significantly higher numbers, and of the 598 civilian casualties reported in the government raids since the beginning of 2018, 31% have been killed in the 9 months since the government raid's front lines shifted in 2021. The UN office renewed the call for urgent and concrete efforts to clear the areas, noting that the mining partners cleared 2 million square meters of contaminated land across Yemen starting last June. The office recalled the great benefits of the truce, saying it led to a decrease in the average monthly rate of casualties. However, landmines have claimed the lives of thousands of Yemenis and injured tens of thousands of people, often with disabling injuries and amputations, putting Yemen as one of the largest mine-laying operations on its territory since the end of World War II.
Coming next in the news. Years of conflict have damaged the mental health of Yemenis nationwide. Welcome back. Hadi Juman, a local humanitarian, was honored among the 3 most prominent humanitarian individuals in the world. In addition, the organization is a global humanitarian award for growing the humanity, and its prize is around $1 million. Hadi was honored by Aurora. In addition, he won the second place and the second prize in the ceremony, which put Yemen at the top of the humanitarian services in the world. Years of conflict has caused damage to the mental health of Yemenis, especially at the time of the war, and especially to children and women. Atrocities of such a bloody war have made thousands of people suffer from traumas which could last for their lifetime. This report has more details.
Yemen's 7 years of brutal civil war have caused an explosion of mental illness, overwhelming the basic healthcare services. Depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and psychosis are some mental diseases that many Yemenis are suffering from. According to Health Ministry figures, the war-torn country, with around 30 million people, had just 59 psychiatrists in 2020, which means one for every 500,000 people. Add in therapists, caregivers, and nurses, and the number of professionals dedicated to mental health rises to 300 divided across 7 hospitals. Director of a psychiatric hospital in the rebel-blockaded city of Taiz stated that they are trying to provide treatment, but they cannot treat everyone. Taiz is one of the places hardest hit by the conflict. While the Taiz Psychiatric Hospital has space for 200 patients, the numbers needing care because of the tragedies caused by the war have surged far higher. The hospital lacks the necessary staff and drugs to cope. As government funds cover just a quarter of its budget, it relies on donations for the rest. The authorities have not published any recent data on mental illness in Yemen, along the Arab Peninsula's poorest country. In 2017, a study was conducted by Yemen's Family Development and Guidance Foundation, based in the rebel-held capital Sana'a, estimated that nearly a fifth of all residents had mental health issues. The report said the population faces constant pressure, loss, and serious shocks, whether as a result of food insecurity, unemployment, cholera, arbitrary detention, torture, indiscriminate attacks, airstrikes, or poor basic public services. The United Nations, in a report this year, said the number could now be even higher because of the additional strain of the COVID pandemic and the continuing toll of the conflict.
Houthi militia cut off the communications network of Yemen Mobile in Sada. Local residents reported that the 4G communication services, which did not last for 1 month, was cut off suddenly, which cut off them from the entire world. In addition, according to Houthis, the internet access is also a problem and has spoiled the principles of the people, which made them cut off the internet from the people. The Yemeni government called on the World Bank to support projects in the energy and transportation sectors and to enhance food security in the country. This came at a meeting held in Washington, which included the ministers of planning, finance, and electricity, and the country director of the Yemen office at the World Bank. Yemen participated in the international conference entitled Accelerating the Flexibility of Food Systems. This came upon the invitation of the Global Program to submit requests for support to the least developed countries. The Global Program for Agriculture and Food Security expects to allocate at least $175 million in grants to finance the affected countries, including Yemen. Despite problems facing farmers in Lahj, they are preparing for the harvest for the new agricultural season. This report has more details.
Farmers here in Al Mudarba district in Lahj Governorate are preparing to harvest the new agricultural season in light of the fear of lack of production due to the scarcity of seasonal rains. Not to mention the damage caused by torrential rains and the prices of oil derivatives that cast a shadow on agricultural work.
الصعوبات التي واجهناها هذا العام هي أول نتيجة غلاء البذور.
The difficulties that we faced during this year include the rise in prices of the seeds, the increase of rent fees of plows costing us 30,000 riyals. And this year we were exposed to extremely heavy flooding that destroyed the lands, as you can see. Now we can't afford the cost to fix and repair our lands due to the increased prices of oil derivatives.
Perhaps what concerns farmers here is the amount of damage and erosion that some areas have been subjected to as a result of the torrential rains on farms, which are extremely difficult to repair, with a severe need for the intervention of local authority and the agriculture office to repair these damages.
There were severe damages that occurred as a result of the heavy rains and the flooding. The soil and the trees were destroyed and the wells were buried. Accordingly, everything that was used to protect this land was destroyed. We call on the agriculture office of the governorate to intervene and repair the lands. We can't afford it as it became very expensive after the increase of oil derivatives prices.
Here, agriculture represents the primary source of livelihood for nearly 90% of the population in Al Mudarba district in Lahj Governorate, where the majority depend on it in the conduct of their lives. But the scarcity of seasonal rains, the damage of the recent torrential rains, and the high prices of oil derivatives constitute concerns that limit the size of ambitions to reach a greater and better levels of production.
Here's a reminder of the main headlines. Government calls for investigating the death of 20 child cancer patients in Sana'a. On World Food Day, Yemenis continue to face catastrophe over rising hunger across the country. Houthi landmines kill hundreds of civilians during the UN truce. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.